Hey folks! So we played both games this week, the Dungeons and the Dragons, and today I'm going to be talking about my campaign that I've been playing for a couple of months now with my friends. They're at 4th level, and they've done a couple of things, and I'll talk to you about just the general campaign and what we've been doing so far, and then we'll go over what happened this session that I played yesterday night. So my players at level 1 start off in a tavern in the town of Deepwater. Classic way to start off an adventure in a tavern. And the town was attacked by undead. They rushed to the rescue and killed the undead. The next day they were asked by the town's priest to find out where they came from and clear that out. They go follow that into a cave, a tomb of an undead warlord. So they clear out the cave and find a name, Calorel the Vile, and a weapon that they can't identify yet. And they go back and report this to the high priest. He tells them to send word to the Baron of Denasia. So they head out on the road to Denasia Keep. They meet up in their travels a couple of times with Father Tace. He is the high priest of Avon, the god of life in the entire barony. And he's kind of the Gandalf character of the group, where he shows up and gives them quests and tells them information about what they're looking for. At first, he doesn't hear anything on the name Calorel the Vile, but he does identify the mace for them. The weapon belonged to Saint Nosa. Saint Nosa, the god of mercy, who was ascended by the god of life, Avon himself. She defeated this evil warlord, but not before he stole her weapon and corrupted it. So they eventually make their way to the town of Whitebridge, where they have a couple of encounters there. They fight some unruly bandits in a tavern, and Calorel the Vile shows up, not unlike the encounter from Matt Colville's campaign. So they have a couple of encounters in Whitebridge and then head off to a sanctuary nearby that they were told about by Father Tace to investigate, to see if everybody was all right there, because there was a necromagical artifact that they were protecting there. Of course, when they got there, it has already been sacked by Calorel the Vile. They end up having to fight the Order's leader and founder, an undead vampire created by Calorel the Vile. They had to fight her in her own tomb with her own magical weapons, which they recovered, and now the paladin is using the shield. But Calorel the Vile got away with the weapon, which was not good for the players. The players meet Tace again along the road after clearing the sanctuary. He informs them that to uncorrupt the mace that they found, they need unworked gold ore, which conveniently nearby there's a goblin mine that contains what they're looking for. They go clear out the mine. They find that the goblins have been subjugated by orcs, but they clear out the mine and slay the orc masters, making tentative friends with the goblins. They're chaotic creatures, so that probably won't last. But we ended the session right before an encounter with a black pudding, and that leads us to last night. So the black pudding encounter went really well. I took a lot of the stats for the black pudding right out of the book. I changed the split ability just slightly. I made it work on any weapons that hit it, not just the weapons that it's immune to, because most of my players don't have slashing weapons. One has a warhammer, one has a rapier, so it doesn't really work. It wouldn't have seen a lot of use, and I wanted this thing to be attacking a lot. I wanted it to split a lot because it was a really cool ability. My players got a lot of entertainment out of watching this black pudding split apart multiple times and fighting progressively weaker enemies, but because they had more enemies to fight, it got more attacks off. Even though the black pudding kept splitting apart, the players were on top of their stuff, so was I, so the combat went really fast. It only took maybe an hour, 45 minutes, which is surprising for a D&D combat, but there were only a couple of players attacking the thing, and it was, what do you do? Roll, bam, 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 done. So after a couple of rounds of combat, the black pudding is vanquished, and they find a cool magic item I came up with. It's just a stone that had the word healing or life or something in Celestial, and one of my players rolled high enough to be able to decipher it, and they said the word, and bam, they were all healed 10 hit points. Wow, that's amazing. So they got a kick out of that. They thought that was awesome, and so they left the Goblin Mines and headed out for Demacia. So I've been having issues with this throughout the entire campaign so far. I'm terrible at describing the scenery during travel. I basically described once they exited the Goblin Caverns that the weather was muggy and rainy on their travel to Demacia, but that doesn't really set the scene. The area that they're traveling through is a Transylvania-like area that's been plagued by undead and vampires, and it's very gloom and doom all the time. It's kind of like Barovia, I hope I'm saying that right, from the Forgotten Realms that Count Strad von Zarovich is the ruler of, where it's very Transylvania-esque. And I didn't convey that to the players properly, I think. Just saying it's rainy and muggy out isn't enough of a scenery setter. I think I could have done that a little bit better, maybe by saying, you emerge from the Goblin Mine and squint your eyes at what little sunlight comes through the overcast sky. The rain beats down onto the plains, muddying the road as you travel towards the keep, the seat of the barony, Demacia. A fog rolls in from the swamps to the east as the days pass. The great city of Demacia rises up in front of you as you near the city gates. Interestingly enough, the gates aren't manned by the usual guards you would find. Instead, all is quiet as you enter the city without incident. You travel along the roads, and you see no one. The shops are closed, no people mill about, maybe one or two stragglers heading towards the center of town. So soon enough, they discovered why the city of Demacia was completely devoid of life, and that's because everybody was in the center of town for the Baron's funeral. The Baron, they soon discovered, was attacked on the road by a band of orcs. The orcs killed the Baron and his entire family, and now their bodies, in caskets, sit on a podium in the middle of town for everybody to see. The players arrived in the town square just in time to see the regent, Lord Saxton, giving a moving eulogy. I feel I could have described the eulogy a little bit more, maybe write up a little blurb that they hear of Lord Saxton giving the eulogy, reciting something of how dear to everyone the Baron was, but I didn't do that, and I don't think that the campaign suffered too much for it, but it would have been a nice thing to do. So after the funeral, the players decide they want to go see Tace, so they head over to the church and find it locked and nobody's there. After a moment, a knight shows up and asks them what they're doing. Now, they saw this knight and many others on the stage where Lord Saxon was giving his speech. The knight asks them what they're doing, why they're at the church. They respond that they're here to see Tace. They're friends of Tace, the high priest, and they want to speak with him. And then the knight says something that they kind of feel like is a little sketchy. The knight responds, "When was the last time you saw Tace alive?" At this, the players are completely taken aback. They go, "Saw alive? Well, we saw him maybe 5 days ago on the road." They didn't really know what to say at this point. They thought that something doesn't seem quite right around here. And indeed, something is not quite right around here. So this knight goes, "Would you mind following me to speak with the regent so he can ask you a couple of questions?" And the players say, "Sure, we'll cooperate, we'll come with you." And they walk off down the street to the keep nearby, and at this point, another knight shows up and starts walking with them. Now they're being escorted by two knights, and they're starting to think, something fishy's going on, but they don't do anything in character. They reach Demacia Keep and walk in, then go to a side room where two more knights are in the room with them, and they're told that they're to wait here for the regent to be ready for them. And now the players are getting suspicious, even more so. Before, they were thinking, should we take on these knights? Should we try to run? I think we could take two knights at once, but now that there's four, they're not so sure. So after a little while, one of the knights comes into the room from another door opposite to the one that they entered in, and says, "All right, the regent will see you now. Please follow me." and them and the knights walk into the room, and now there are 5 knights. The regent stands before them next to a throne. His priest is next to him, and they're standing there conversing. The players approach, and they say that they're friends of Tace, and they were wondering what's going on. The regent, Lord Saxton, looks to them and asks them the same question. When was the last time you saw Tace alive? They explain they saw him just merely 5 days ago on the road to Demacia. And he explains to them that Tace has gone missing. He has not come back. He's not in town. He was supposed to be back a couple of days ago. The players kind of describe what they were doing and what they were talking to Tace about, but I kind of described the regent as not listening, but I did it too late, so it didn't really have the full effect of the regent not really caring about what they were saying. For those of you who watch Matt Colville's videos and his campaign diaries, this all might sound extremely familiar to you. But as the players were describing their adventures to Lord Saxon, I eventually told them that he looked like he wasn't quite listening. He was just sitting there muttering to his priest and only half listening to what they were saying. They tell Lord Saxon that they found a note in the goblin mine that they were adventuring in that somebody was looking to kidnap Father Tace, and they don't know who it was from, but they have their suspicions that they're involved with this keep that's outside the barony to the west. At this, Lord Saxon points a finger at the players and says, "Knights, arrest these rat catchers." The players kind of saw that coming. They were thinking, yeah, this was definitely a setup. Luckily, earlier in the session, the party actually split. Half of the party went to the local tavern to collect information, and 2 of the characters, Kita, the Eladrin paladin, played by my friend Rachel, and Rule, the human rogue, played by my friend Joe, went to speak to the regent. So Lord Saxton commands 2 of his knights to go into town to arrest the rest of the party. The 3 knights remaining draw their swords, and Kita draws St. Nosa's hammer. At this, the 3 knights are taken aback completely. They know what this is, and they want it. So Saxton leaves the room to let his men finish them off. It's 3 knights and the cleric versus Kita and Rule, and it's initiative. So this encounter with the evil knights was much more of a slog than the only other combat encounter in the session, the one with the black pudding. While the black pudding had cool abilities like the fact that it splits in half when you do too much damage to it, and it damages your weapons and armor when you get attacked or it attacks you, and when it hits you, it does a bunch of acid damage. These guys were just a bunch of bags of hit points, basically. I used a tool that I found online. I think it was called RPG Tinker or something like that, that generated a stat block for a paladin. I set the thing at level 7, but 3 of these guys seemed a little weak against the players, but I like to give the players a lot of loot and stuff, so the players are probably a little bit more powerful than they would be at this level. But as the GM, I was able to change their stats on the fly. I could raise or lower their hit points whenever I wanted to. It was behind the screen, so none of the players could see. I wanted this encounter to go south for the players really quickly, but the players, especially because the paladin was involved, had a lot of healing at their disposal with that rock that they had found in the Black Pudding encounter and her Lay on Hands ability. So the 2 players' hit point totals were a roller coaster. I set the enemies at level 7 because I wanted it to be a really challenging encounter. Very likely that they would not have got out of this alive. Obviously, I wouldn't have killed them off in this encounter because the knights wanted to arrest them, not kill them. So they were using non-lethal force. If any of them had gone to negative hit points, I would have said that they stabilize you and take you into custody. But that didn't happen. The battle was very much a slog, going back and forth. I had to make one of them use their Lay on Hands ability at one point. They killed one of the knights, so there were only 2 left, and once the players ran out of healing abilities, they knew that they were completely SOL. So Kita ended up handing off St. Nosa's hammer to Rule, and he got out of there quick. At that point, Kita pretty much surrendered. which was completely fine with me. I have a plan for this. So after Kita surrenders, I describe that the evil knights put her in shackles and drag her off to the palace dungeons, and then we switch back to the other half of the party. At this point, I asked my friends Rachel and Joe to get up and leave the table. And we're playing at a local comic book shop, so they just went off and looked at Warhammer minis for a little while. So we'll switch back over to the other half of the party, consisting of Alris, the female Eldritch Knight, played by my friend Stacy, and Roland, the male druid, played by my friend Chelsea, and Alice, the female bard, played by my friend Jennifer. The three of them decided to go to one of the seedy taverns around town to try to collect information on what was going on, maybe gather some more information on the Baron's murder. So they get to this tavern, and the tavern keeper looks up from what he was doing and exclaims, "Get out of here! We don't serve rat catchers around here. This is a fine establishment." Clearly it wasn't. And at this point, Alris bursts out, "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm a hero. I saved the town of Deepwater. I'm friends of Tace, the Baron's high priest." And at this point, she said exactly what I wanted her to say. So, again, if you've seen Matt Colville's campaign diaries, you'll know where this is going. She feels a tug at her side of her clothing, and a little halfling is standing there next to her. And he goes, "Excuse me, ma'am, your voice carries. Would you care to take this conversation outside?" So the three of them accompany this little halfling outside, and he takes them into a little back alley, and all of a sudden gets really stern and serious with them. He looks at the three of them in disbelief. "Don't you know what's going on around here? Don't you know that Lord Saxon is trying to exterminate Tace because he's loyal to Baron Deimos?" And the players look at each other. They're like, "No, we had no idea that this was going on." So this halfling asks them if they have any others in their party. And they say, yes, they went to go speak to Tace. And he says, "There may be in some serious trouble then. Let me help you." He pulls out a key and hands it to the players, and then picks up a stick and starts drawing a map of the keep in the dirt. He says to the players, "Here's the keep, and here's the church, and here's the secret passage that connects the two." He says, "This key is a skeleton key to the Baron's prisons. Use it to get your friends out of there before they're killed. I don't have much more time. Good luck." And he runs away. So the players immediately run to the church and plan their break-in to get to the secret passage. Along the way, they meet up with Rule, the rogue. So the four of them break into the church, get down to the cellars, and take the secret passage to the Baron's prisons, where they find Kita behind bars. Now at this point, in Matt Colville's game, he had put one of the knights in the prisons to guard the prisoners. Now this just so happened to be the reason that one of his players was killed. So even though it wasn't as realistic as it could have been, I decided to not have anyone guard Kita in the prisons, so that when the players showed up, they could break her out of jail, sneak out, and get out of the city. And it paid off. The players didn't even realize that it was completely unrealistic for her to be just left in the prisons unguarded. They broke her out, got out of there, and left the city. The players really enjoyed this encounter. Stacy, playing Alris, who was given the skeleton key, really enjoyed having the power to go into the prisons and break Kita out of jail. It was really empowering to have that in their pocket, and it made their experience that much better. And that's where we ended it off. They ran into the woods, traveled over to that keep that they had talked about earlier in the session, called Broken Spire Keep. And that's where we ended off, because it looks like they are going to storm the keep. So that's it, folks. That's the good, the bad, and the ugly of my session last night. I really hope you guys found this insightful and enjoyable. And if you guys subscribe, I will definitely be making more of these videos. Even if you don't subscribe, I'll be making more of these videos. This is fun. I really enjoy this. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next session.